On today's show, does Luka Doncic want the Mavericks to make big roster changes? He denies it. Mark Cuban denies it. I'll tell you why they're both wrong. Coming up on today's Locked On Mavs.
I'm Luka Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks.
Mavericks, NBA champions.
Bang! It's good! And the Mavericks have won the game!
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
Loyalty never fades away.
And welcome. You are locked on to the Dallas Mavericks. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member and NBA channel manager for the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Mavs your first listen each and every day. We are free and available on all podcast platforms, including YouTube. But the best way you can help us grow the show is to comment anything below. Let me know, what's one roster move that the Mavericks have to make? Not just you think they should make, one they have to make. Isaac is out, still visiting family. He will return tomorrow, and you know we're going to dive all into those rumors more tomorrow as well. That Luka Doncic wants the Mavericks to make big roster changes, wants to upgrade, has to upgrade at the trade deadline. We'll talk a lot about that tomorrow. I'll touch on it today for sure. We'll also today talk about the Mavs versus Hawks game. Mavs fall in that one. Dorian Finney-Smith, Josh Green return. How did they look? How come the Mavericks can't play any defense? What did the Mavs say after the game? Talk about all that today. Let's get into it. Luka Doncic, according to ESPN, sources tell Tim McMahon that Doncic, who hasn't shown a desire to be involved in personnel matters in the past, has strongly indicated he wants the Mavs to upgrade before the February 9th trade deadline. Now, this is not just, all right, we got to make a move. You got to change something soon. He wants the Mavs to upgrade the roster before the trade deadline. February 9th, that's coming up. That's like really close to now. How many weeks are we talking? 1, 2, 3. That's 3 weeks from now that the Mavericks would have to upgrade the roster. And they don't have a lot of pieces to do it. You guys have listened to us. You listening have listened to us talk about trades, things that they can do. The big thing is they can't trade any of their first round picks this year if they want to make a huge upgrade this offseason. I was talking to a couple listeners today at the game, and I was like, I don't think they're going to make any big moves. They agreed. They're like, yeah, I just don't think that they can't trade any of those firsts. If anything, they have to go get more assets to be able to go get somebody this offseason. Because it has to be this offseason to make the big move, right? Sid from Toy Story, the big one, right? Like, they have to make the big move this offseason. But if sources tell ESPN that Luka strongly indicated he wants the Mavs to upgrade the roster before the trade deadline. So then Mark Cuban comes out and replies to Tim McMahon in some form or fashion, probably through an email, maybe a text, and says, quote, Tim McMahon got it dead wrong. Luka has never suggested, asked, demanded, or discussed changes to the roster. Luka and Nico Harrison have a great relationship. They talk almost daily. Luka knows exactly what we have going on and is very supportive. That's Mark Cuban talking about these reports from Luka. And then after the game, Luka says this about the quote.
Luka, there's a report that came out today about you expressing
shout out
to
to
the
Tim
front office or that you'd like to see roster change. Mark came out and talked about it. I know in the past you've told us like you want to leave those decisions to the front office. Is that still the way you're approaching kind of your relationship with Nico and with Jason and with Mark?
I mean, obviously, I know people who are next to me, who I talk to, they know that's not true. I didn't say nothing about that. But I talk to Nico, I talk to Finn more than I used to. But that's not just the way I talk to them. So we have the great communication, and that just stays between us.
So Luka says, people who are next to me, who I talk to, they know that it's not true. Like, the people closest to me know that report is not true of me. He said, I talked to Nico Harrison. I talked to Finn, who's Michael Finley, who's in the front office. He said, I talked to them more than I used to, and that's just the way I talk to them. We've been in great communication. Fine, great. Like, that's what Mark Cuban said too. Luka and Nico have a great relationship. They talk almost daily. That's what Mark Cuban said. Okay, cool. I think that they're both wrong. I think Luka and Mark Cuban are missing the point on this. They are honing in specifically on Luka making a demand of the front office. Luka saying, we got to upgrade at this point in some kind of like, okay, we have to, all right, we have to do it by this certain point, right? Like we have to do it by the February 9th trade deadline or else. Okay, like some kind of demand, an ultimatum. They're denying that Luka is making an ultimatum. Of course, if you've watched Luka at any point this year, if you've watched him on the court, are you listening? If you've watched Luka Doncic play with JaVale McGee at all this season, you know for sure that Luka wants the Mavericks to upgrade this roster. Of course he does. Of course the Mavericks want to. They want to upgrade the roster at every chance they get. That's why you're in this game, right? You're not in this game with Luka Doncic, having Luka Doncic be this good, touting him, displaying him all over town on billboards and everything, to not go to the Western Conference Finals last year, to not try and make this roster better. Which is why it drives me and Isaac so nuts sometimes when they're like, the Mavs have never tried to make the roster better. Well, of course they have. They've failed. They failed several times. They know it. They've moved on from some failures. Kristaps Porzingis. They tried to move on from the Jalen Brunson thing with getting Christian Wood, right? Like they failed on certain aspects of this for sure. And so now it's like, all right, well, Luka didn't make an ultimatum with the Mavericks. He didn't make a demand. But of course, if Luka's talking to Nico Harrison and Michael Finley almost daily, of course he's going to strongly indicate he wants the Mavs to upgrade the roster. It's just the before the February 9th trade deadline part of the report that they're denying. Right? Because what if Mark Cuban came out and said, Luka doesn't want the Mavs to upgrade the roster. He thinks that the Mavericks are perfect where they are. Luka doesn't think that. Have you watched him play? Have you watched his body language on the court in games when they just don't have it, when they're not hitting threes? Like, this guy wears his emotions on his sleeve. And it's a thing that we all love about him, that you love about Luka. The Luka magic, the getting in guys' faces, the not taking crap from anybody. That's what we love about Luka, that he's invested, that he wants to win no matter what. Him in the playoffs, going balls to the wall. That's what you love about Luka Doncic. Of course he wants this team to be better. He didn't call for an ultimatum. And it's not like you have to upgrade it. It has to be this trade deadline. He didn't demand or make an ultimatum. Of course he wants them to upgrade the roster. Of course he does. So then you're left with, all right, what now then? If you believe that Luka is talking to Nico and Finley every day, and it's at a certain point he's talked about making upgrades to the roster, I think the Mavericks will be a little bit more active than maybe we thought, right? I think that's what it comes down to. Is like, do you think that he is pushing them in a way that makes them uncomfortable enough to try and make a move now? And do you want that? Do you want the Mavericks to do that? There's two camps. There's the camp of they can't waste another year of Luka. This season, like this team is not a championship season. We didn't think it was last year either. They achieved last year. But if you think they can't waste another season, they got to make a move now. Or you could be in the camp of they have to do a big thing. They can't just do a thing. They can't just go get Bojan Bogdanovic from the Pistons for like a future 2027 first and like Davis's contract, right? If they go do that, is this team a title contender with Bogdanovic and the rest of this roster? They're definitely better. You'd feel better about the roster going into the playoffs. And with Luka, you never know. You never know what can happen, especially like last year. But they're not a title contender. They're not a title favorite, at least. You want to go in knowing, all right, we have a roster that can contend with anybody. They can probably contend with anybody in the West. They're not beating the teams out East. They're not beating the Celtics. They're not beating the Bucks probably when they're at full strength. Nets, if they get healthy again, they're a lot better, right? They're not beating those teams. And so then what is it? So would you rather Luka put the pressure on them to make a move now? Or would you rather Luka, just keep pushing? Like, hey, I'm going to keep pushing you guys to make improvements. And Nico Harrison and Michael Finley are like, we got to wait till this summer to make a big move. So if you want to team up with somebody, if you want to do a superhero team-up movie with somebody, it's got to be this summer. It can't happen this year yet because we don't have our picks, blah, blah, blah. They're going to tell him all that. And I'm sure that they have. He's been involved with it. And I wonder if him being involved and talking to them more has helped his understanding of all of it, right? It's a whole new system in the NBA. It takes years to learn the cap and all that kind of stuff. And I wonder if they're helping him learn that too. So that's what I've got. That's what I took away from this whole Luka saga today. We'll talk about it more tomorrow with Isaac for sure. So come back tomorrow if you want to hear that. We will talk about coming next. The Dallas Mavericks lose to the Hawks. What does it mean when the Mavericks get their wings back and they can't play defense? Talk about that coming up. But before we do, let me tell you about Built Bar. It's a protein bar. It tastes like a candy bar. They're delicious. I've ordered my own. They're so great. I love them. I'm waiting on my box of the brownie batter puffs to come in the mail. 140 calories, 17 grams of protein, only 6 grams of sugar, and a bar covered in 100% chocolate with the marshmallow fluff in the middle. You'll love them. I guarantee that you'll love this bar specifically. It's the best one they have. They're available right now in Walmart. You can go get a couple of select flavors. You can go get select flavors at Sam's Club. You can also still go to the website. Try the promo code LOCKED15. Try the promo code LOCKEDON. And you can get 15% off the site-wide right now on their site. So go check it out. It's built.com. Go check out the brownie batter puff and all the other great flavors they have at built.com. All right, Isaac Harris, thanks for making Locked On Mavs your first listen today. We talked about the Luka rumors. Does he want the roster to be upgraded? What does that mean? We'll talk a lot about that tomorrow. But let's talk about this Mavs versus Hawks game tonight. Mavs lose 130 to 122. Whew. This was an Dallas Mavericks game. This was an Dallas Mavericks game where there's no defense being played. None at all. No defense for the Mavericks. No defense for the Hawks really either, and the Mavs just couldn't keep up with them. This is a talented Hawks team. They have not played well. They have some weird issues. The Trae Young thing this year with his coach is weird. Him not showing up to a game is weird. There's just weird Hawks stuff happening. They've got talent. They've always had this really talented roster. They've done all the things that Mavericks fans want the Mavericks to do. The Hawks have done and have succeeded with getting DeJounte Murray in a big trade, nailing the draft with John Collins and Onyeka Okongwu, and trading for a big and Clint Capella, and signing a big free agent with Bogdanovic. Like, they've done all those. They've checked their former front office has checked all the boxes. By the way, Landry Fields was at the game tonight. He's the new GM for the Mavs the Hawks, and he was standing right behind me for like the entire game, talking to another scout, like the entire game. I don't know what he was doing, what they were talking about, but they were just standing there talking. And so the Mavericks go into this game. Hawks score 40 points in the first quarter, and you're just saying, all right, well, I thought we had these guys back. Dorian Finney-Smith starts. Josh Green comes off the bench and plays good minutes in the first half, and they just can't stop them at all. They can't play any defense. And the Mavericks go on one good run. They go on one really good run where the Hawks just couldn't get it together. Offensively, the Mavs got a couple of stops. They go up by 10. This game stayed pretty tight. The biggest lead was the Mavericks by 10. That's the biggest lead in this whole game. So the Mavericks go on that big run in the third quarter. Big run. It was like a 10-0 run. That's a huge run in this game because of how tight it was the whole game. And then just slowly by the end of the third quarter, they just relinquish it back, and they're down by 1 by the end of the third quarter. That stretch right there, just the third quarter alone, that they couldn't hold on to that lead and keep the lead because they couldn't defend at all, is the reason why they didn't win this game. You could point to a bunch of different things. You could point to, well, they couldn't hit they only hit 38% of their threes, and the Hawks hit 50%. Okay, well, they missed 6 free throws. 6 free throws could have made a difference in this game. They still would have lost even if they hit them all. The big difference in this game was defense. The Mavericks couldn't defend anything. Mavericks couldn't stop any kind of mid-range shot. I mean, DeJounte Murray went nuts in the mid-range. 12 of 18 from the floor, 4 of 6 from 3. That means what did he get? He went 8 of 12 from 2, which is like all his mid-range stuff that he was throwing up, which the Mavericks will allow. Their defense will allow you to take mid-range shots, and DeJounte Murray is going to take them all. They were really successful on Trae Young. He does all the things the Mavericks don't want you to do. Take threes, get stuff around the rim, get the short floater type stuff around the rim they don't want you to get. He got a couple of those, but not many. He only took 11 shots in this game, and a bunch of them were late. And he went to the free throw line 8 times. So he scored 18 points, but and a lot of those were just like free throws towards the end of the game when it was the Mavs were playing the foul game. They contained him pretty well, decently. But then he became a playmaker. He had 12 assists. I mean, he poses some of the same issues that Luka poses. He's not as good as Luka. I will never, ever admit that he is on this podcast. I don't think Brad Rowland on Locked On Hawks would admit that about Trae Young and Luka. We don't have to talk about that. But they made him a playmaker. He kicked out to guys. And the Hawks made 50% of their shots. Jason Kidd said after the game, he was talking about their defense, and he said, I think it was Brad Townsend asked him, how do you fix the defense? He said, if it's going to be this personnel, we keep asking or demanding that these guys play defense. The Hawks shot 57%. That's a shoot around. That's what Jason Kidd said after the game. He's right. That's a shoot around for that team. 57% shooting from the floor for the Hawks. That's not good if you're the Mavericks. And so you look at this team, like, all right, we finally got Dorian Finney-Smith back, finally got Josh Green back. You got Bullock coming off the bench now. But that starting lineup of Luka, Dinwiddie, Wood, Powell, and then Dorian, like, you're just not, that's not enough defenders. That's not enough quality, good defenders to do anything against a really good team. Our friend Iztok on Twitter from Slovenia, really good analyst on the Mavs, said the Mavericks haven't beat a competent team in a month. And I thought about it for a second. I was like, you know what? I think he's right. Now they've had those injuries. They feel like a real team again. And there's a report that Maxey could be back before All-Star break or around the All-Star break, which would be a miraculous recovery for him, which you're hoping is true. So you're hoping that you get Maxey back for the last 2 months of the season or so. But this team's starting to feel real right now, but it has been a while since they've beaten a real team. Even their 7-game run, they didn't beat a competent team. Even in their 7-game win streak, their last couple wins, Lakers, Pelicans without their stars. You know, even the Knicks didn't have Brunson, didn't have RJ Barrett for most of the game. You go back to Portland, December 16th. That was probably the last win the Mavericks had that's like against a decent team. And then before that, it's like Thunder again. And then Denver. And then Phoenix. And you're like, okay, is Phoenix a competent team? I don't know if Phoenix is a competent team. You start going through, and this Mavericks team hasn't beaten a real team in a while. And it's because of this defense. They can't defend. This team cannot defend with the personnel they have. I found it really interesting that Jason Kidd said, if it's going to be this personnel, when asked how do you fix the defense, said, how do you fix the defense? Well, if it's going to be this personnel, you can chalk that up to whoever you want on the roster. If it's going to still be, you know, Luka with these guys, if it's still going to be Christian Wood at starting set, if it's going to be Dwight Powell and Christian Wood starting together like that, you know, that's not a good enough big man pairing to defend well against any good team. It's just not. Which is why there's been so many people with concerns about Christian Wood long term. He's just not good. He's not good enough defensively to stand up against some of these good teams. Neither is Dwight Powell. That's why the Mavericks had to upgrade at big. Now, I think Christian Wood could definitely be better than Dwight Powell. I think Christian Wood has had some good blocks. He had a couple of good blocks in this game. He had 9 rebounds and one of them offensive, which is huge. He got called for a couple of dumb fouls in this game. There's some weird fouls. Scott Foster was in his bag tonight, just calling weird stuff across the board. So you can't put it all on Christian Wood for sure. But if it's going to be this lineup, with Christian Wood playing a big part of it, with Dwight Powell starting as well, JaVale McGee can't play. He plays 3 minutes, and you're like, he can't play. 2 turnovers, you know, a dumb foul. gets a nice and one. And you're like, okay, cool. But if you can't play him and Maxey's out, they're sucking wind at the big man spot, which is why Maxey is so important for this team. So the Mavericks in the third quarter, they just can't get it done. They build up a 10-point lead, and then they relinquish it just almost immediately. Mavericks made a lineup change, and it just really changed the direction of the third quarter. Christian Wood got called for. No, the Mavericks basically just changed. Oh, the challenge. The challenge took a lot of air out of the room too. So Mavericks are up by 10. 3 minutes later, the Mavericks have to call a challenge. Another one. This is like the 3rd or 4th game in a row the Mavericks call a challenge because the ball goes out of bounds on Atlanta. It's pretty clearly Atlanta. And even if the refs didn't see it at the time, the replay on the video board played it right away. I mean, everyone in the building could see clearly off of an Atlanta Hawk leg. And so the refs say, we didn't see it. We got to call a jump ball. They call a jump ball. And then the Mavericks are like, no, we can see it on this video board right above us that it's Mavericks ball. So they call a challenge. I don't think they should have called a challenge on that. I think Kidd likes to get rid of his challenges early so the Mavs don't like keep asking him and pestering him to call a challenge throughout the game. That's just a theory. But they challenge it. It's obviously a success. So the Mavericks get the ball back. And that was just a weird moment. And like a minute and a half later, the Mavericks are only up by 1. Like, it was just this weird moment. Luka chucked up a 3, and then at the last second, Trae Young goes coast to coast, throws an alley-oop to Clint Capella on a fast break. And then the Mavericks don't lead at the end of the third quarter where they went on a 15-3 run in the quarter. It's just bad. If you can't defend, you can't win games in the NBA or hold on to leads. Like, you have to hold on to leads, even if you can get it with your offense. You can't hold on to leads if your defense is that bad. So coming up, why was the defense that bad? Why couldn't they defend? What about Josh Green and Dorian Finney-Smith? How did they look in this game? What about Luka Doncic? We'll talk about that coming up. But before we do, let me tell you about BetOnline. It's the best place to check out the odds and lines inside and outside of all sports. You can go and see it right now. You can check out the NFL stuff this weekend. Love to play guest lines with Isaac. Ooh, the Chiefs are now a 9-point favorite against the Jaguars. That one went up a little bit. Eagles 7.5-point favorite against the Giants. The Bills 5.5-point favorite at home against the Bengals. Cowboys 3.5-point underdog. I'm interested to see how that game goes. That's going to be a really good one. That one's right during a Mavericks game. Right in the middle of a Mavericks game. So that'll be an interesting, it'll be interesting to see how that one's attended. But you can check it all out at BetOnline. You can check out baseball odds for futures. They have obviously football for college football and all that. You can go check out basketball futures as well. It's BetOnline where the game starts. All right, Isaac, thanks for making Locked On Mavs your first listen today. Let's get into this game. Why couldn't the Mavericks defend? Well, they can't defend because this team's defense is all based on scheme and effort. Effort to carry out the scheme. You have to put in effort. We asked Josh Green after the game, what's the biggest thing the Mavericks are dealing with defensively? He says, I think it's communication. And so he talks about communication, how it's important to communicate on defense, kind of like a normal basketball answer. So then later, Luka comes in, and I asked Luka, I said, somebody asked Luka if what's the biggest issue? Is it communication? And he said, communication is one of the issues, and then talks about some other things. And so later I was like, hey, Luka, if communication is the biggest issue, where does that start? Where does communication start? And he said, well, communication is not the biggest issue. It's other things. It's energy and effort. Those are the two words he used. Then he kind of mumbled the rest of it. But it's true. This team has to put in effort, which is why in big moments, in games that matter, this team looks great. And in moments that don't, this team looks awful. It's because their defense relies on energy and effort. It's why in the playoffs, they can go rattle off some really great looking games, or they just defend and look like they can beat anybody. And then they can lose to teams that you're like, this team should not lose to that team. And so energy and effort are two of the bigger things. It's big things because they have to rotate a lot, because they have to cover for guys. When Jason Kidd talks about personnel, like to change this, you have to have better personnel. You have to have better defenders that can hold their own, that can fight through screens, that can block shots at the rim, that can alter shots, that can turn away shots. Like there are moments when DeJounte Murray is taking a floater, and if Christian Wood was a step up and in his face, that shot doesn't happen. If he's Rudy Gobert, if he's Nick Claxton, if he is Jarrett Allen, if he is some of these guys in the NBA that can deter some of that stuff, if he's Walker Kessler, for God's sakes, with Utah, if he's some of those guys and plays defense the way those guys do, it changes what this team could do defensively. And he's just not that. For better or for worse. It's for worse, but for whatever you blame him or not. Some of that you just have to be great. Some of that you just have to be a great defensive player. It has to just be part of who you are as a player. Christian Wood's great at a ton of things. He's not great at that. Dwight Powell's great at one thing. He's not great. He's not great at defense or defending the rim, really. It's been an issue for the Mavericks. The Mavericks tried to go out and address it with JaVale McGee. I saw a tweet. I saw Kirk Henderson retweet somebody. I didn't know who it was. And they said, if the Mavericks could go out and just get one mid defensive rim protector, if they could just go out and get one mid one, like not even a great one, not even a good one above average, just mid. Just a mid rim protector, then this team would be a 52-55 win team, they said. Guess what? They did that. They thought they did that. They went out and got a mid defender in JaVale McGee, and he's just looked so much worse than last year. So another way the Mavericks went out and tried to do something, had the best intentions, and failed. At this point, I don't know if I blame the Mavericks for failing on JaVale McGee that bad. The Bucks wanted him too. It wasn't just the Mavericks. The Mavericks were competing with the Bucks to get JaVale McGee. So it's not like the Mavericks just got fleeced. Oh, they got fleeced by this guy. It was just terrible. He was good last year on the Suns, who were the number one team in the NBA throughout the regular season. And then what happened? And then he was going to get signed by the Bucks, who are supposed to be a title contender to this team. So it's so weird that JaVale McGee is this bad, but because he is, and the Mavericks couldn't and didn't address it in any other way, their big man rotation is so bad defensively. It's so bad defensively. And Luka's being asked to do a lot. And Luka's a problem in this too, right? I talked about Christian Wood enough. Luka's a problem in this too. Luka will try hard on possessions for sure, but Luka's getting hurt here and there, and then he's like hobbling, and he's being asked to do a lot on offense. And so then he doesn't put as much effort. And then Spencer Dinwiddie tonight, he did a lot on offense. He took 18 shots. Good for Spencer Dinwiddie being aggressive. So a lot is being asked of Spencer Dinwiddie. He's not the greatest defender either. He's big. Luka and Dinwiddie are both big. They can be in the right spots. They can move their feet quick, but they're not elite defenders or even great defenders or even above average defenders unless they put in a ton of effort, which is what Luka said. If you don't put in effort, then this defense is not going to be good. And if one part of the defense isn't good, the rest of it's not good. How many times this season have you watched the Mavericks play some really good defense all up until the last second or an offensive rebound, which Hawks only got 7 in this game. The Mavericks got 10. They had great effort on the boards tonight. But they play great defense for like 22 of the 24 seconds. And then the final second, they get a wide open layup or a shot or a wide open 3 or something like that, right? You've seen that a ton of time because it just takes effort. You have to be so locked in. And that's why it felt like this team was on a heater defensively in the playoffs last year. Because you have to be all locked in. It has to be everybody together, everybody on the same page. That's why Josh Green was talking about communication, but Luka was talking about energy. It's both. You have to be so locked in with this team to play the scheme that has to overcome for all these different obstacles they have defensively. They can still defend well. You just got to have the energy, the effort, and it's hard, though. It's really hard to play defense like this, especially when you're running up and down. The Hawks have so many different weapons that can kill you on offense. You know, you stop Trae Young from taking a shot, and then all of a sudden the ball like zips over to DeJounte Murray, who steps forward and takes a mid-range shot. And you're like, wait, what just happened? I thought we just stopped this play. Nope. 2 points. 2 points all the same. You stopped one guy, and it just went over to another guy. It's just what happens with this team defensively. So they have defensive problems. It's bad, which is one of the reasons why I think the Mavs have to be a little picky with the second star they get. They can't just go get, another really good offensive player that can't play defense at all. Then all of a sudden you just have more of the same problems. This team can still score. This team has had a top 5 offense. With Christian Wood and Luka and Dinwiddie, like you can, and a couple shooters, you can do a lot offensively. Mavericks have slipped to 6th, but they're 6th offensively in cleaning the glass. They're 25th defensively now. Same kind of look as Utah. Utah is 2nd, or Denver. Utah too, but Denver is 2nd in offense, 20th in defense. Like they have the same sort of problems. Portland, kind of the same way. 8th in offense, 21st in defense. And then Utah, 4th in offense, 26th in defense. Like all 4 of those teams have very similar issues and problems. And the Mavericks have to address those. I don't know if they can address them at the trade deadline or not, but defense. Wow, I just went on a really long defense rant and didn't really talk about Josh Green and Dorian Finney-Smith at all. But that was the big story tonight was defense. So I felt like it needed to have its moment. Dorian Finney-Smith and Josh Green. Dorian hit his first 3. He missed his last 5, but he had 6 offensive rebounds. Isaac Harris would be so happy that Dorian got that many offensive rebounds. He's the effort. He's the effort to get the boards back to where it needs to be, right? Where you're talking about, the Mavericks getting killed. He's the guy that has to be the effort guy. You can see him at times clapping, getting guys back engaged. He's the vocal leader that the Mavericks had last year, that the Mavericks have been missing for a while, like weeks. He had 3 assists as well, and went to the free throw line, had a huge putback late in the game. Josh Green had an awesome like 10-minute stretch in the first half where he had went to the free throw line 4 times, had a great assist with a wraparound pass. He had the offensive rebound, wraparound pass to Bullock, who cut. He had another like pump fake and drive and dunk in the second quarter. Just like really, really good Josh Green minutes. He only played 20 minutes. He should be fine. He just had an elbow injury that he ran into Grayson Allen. And so it was just a weird injury. He didn't think it would take as long as it did. But those guys I thought both did well considering they're coming back from injury. But it comes down to they're good on defense. They're not great enough to overcome some of the Mavs' defensive issues, and it's got to be everybody together. So little rust from them defensively, but the team just failed totally together. Tomorrow we'll talk more about Luka, wanting roster changes, what those roster changes could be. Why did Mark Cuban respond? What's going on with the mural guy? The mural guy went on the ticket with our friend Jake Kemp, and it's really funny. his interview. Go check that out if you are interested in some funny stuff from Jake Kemp and those guys on the ticket. And go check out Locked On NBA Game to Game. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On NBA Game to Game on the Odyssey app, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Guys, thanks so much for listening to Locked On Mavs. Peace out. Boom.